Okay, we're here. We made it. Hey guys, welcome to the 58th episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comic book community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or adaptations, we hit it all. This week, of course, I am joined by the Canadian Cape Crusader himself, my partner in crime, Comic Boom, my brother. What is up?
Man, just no, same old, man. Just working and coming back, and I just finished eating my carrots, and you're just eating yours, I guess.
I do have carrots. Wait, there's a salad right next to me. Example A, carrot. Hello. I gotta eat this. Gotta eat the vegetables. So I'm long enough to annoy people I'm alive long enough to annoy people on the internet.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be this topic this week is about the artists. Do artists still move the needle? Axel Alonso, way back when in 2017, he made that infamous comment that was quite controversial. He felt at the time that Marvel was of the view that artists never really moved the needle as much as they used to. And, is that still the case? And because in a very real way, at least with respect to cover art, it looks as if perhaps some artists, at least cover artists, are making a resurgence. But what about the interior art? Is there such a thing as a superstar artist anymore? Is there any such thing as that? Is that even a thing anymore, a superstar artist? Because they seem to be doing, arguably many of them are becoming less associated with particular titles. But I don't know. Is there a superstar artist? I'm not sure. Do they move the needle? That's the question.
I don't know. Let's. I was gonna try to make a very timely entrance for the thumbnail with Jack Kirby. There he is. Let's ask Jack Kirby. It's a really interesting question because you brought up a very specific area of this conversation in some of those artists that really only, for the most part, do covers, right? It's just less time, more and less concern on time. They get paid way more. Like, the one thing I've learned about making a comic book is that artists get paid so much more for cover art. And 9 times out of 10, it's simpler. I don't know why. I don't know what the rationale for it is, but it's a weird thing. And so a lot of these guys can spare themselves all of the sort of arduousness of, going by these monthly periodical shipping schedules, so on and so forth, and just do covers. Now, a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. I think superstar artists still exist. I very much think that's the case. You got the Jorge Jimenez's, the Jim Lees, but it does very much seem that with Jim Lee's generation and maybe the generation just behind it, like the Image apes, right? The guys that kind of got brought up aping the Image 7. I feel like the sort of status of the artist has certainly declined, and certainly the weight they pull. I don't know. I mean, Boom, you've been paying attention to the comic book industry, for 40 plus years now. And you've seen so many transitions throughout, all this time. What do you see going on? What's the trajectory of the status of the comic book artists? What kind of clout do they carry nowadays? Well, he's a frozen. Can everybody hear me, or am I frozen? I just want to make sure. Boom. If you can hear me, I might have to boot you and then bring you back in. Or you might have to bring yourself back in. So we're going to click that. And then add to stream. And we're not going very far. Okay, so I am clear. Boom, could you hear anything I just said? Yeah, I have. Well, I can't.
Well,
I can't hear you. You're really breaking up, bud. Oh, let's see. There he is. Sorry, you were breaking up like crazy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I hope this doesn't like I'm in the process of revamping my system here at home, but
Yeah.
you can hear me now? Like,
yeah, you're coming in perfectly clear now. So I guess just to reiterate, I had asked you, just
yeah,
given the amount of time, all of the fluctuation you've seen throughout the industry in the last
yeah.
40 or so years, where do you see this going, and what have you noticed so far?
Well, first I would say that in the past there was a lot less transition because artists stayed on the books much longer. I mean, I back in the day, I mean, you had your Walt Simonson on Thor, you had your Kurt Swan on Superman, you had all these people that John Byrne on his Superman, George Perez on Teen Titans and on Wonder Woman. You had much longer runs by these artists than you're seeing nowadays. The transition is a lot more. And then in the past, we never really had a huge fixation on cover art. There wasn't really a huge big deal. I mean, the first variant cover was John Byrne's Man of Steel. That was the first time there was ever. That was in 1986. That was the very first variant cover. And what's interesting now, when you alluded to it, is just how much more prominence now the cover art gets. And I mean, really, probably the most extreme example would be Captain America, Alex Ross. I mean, Captain America comic books, they're selling reasonably well because everyone wants the Alex Ross cover. Does anybody have a clue what Ta-Nehisi Coates' story is? I've not read a single issue of that in probably 15 months, but I bought it for the covers. This is a phenomena. It's getting, I think it's huge. It's moving the spec market. The needle is moving for cover artists. But, I did, I tried to come up with a creative team right now that has a consistent artist on it. And I could only come up with 10. But I know there's more, but just bear with me. And this is kind of ended. I got Greg Capullo and Snyder on Batman, Death Metal. I cheated a bit. I put Alex Maleev and Bendis with their Jessica Jones and Leviathan. Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates on Venom. These are Destiny Classic runs. Ivan Reis with Bendis on Superman. Peter Tomasi and Gleason on his Super Sons run. And arguably Batman.
So, boom,
and Robin, Fabik, and Jeff.
We started breaking up with you after Tomasi and Gleason.
Yeah, well, after Sean Gordon Murphy, I was Jason Fabik and Jeff Johns on Dark Side War. Scotty Young now is starting something on Strange Academy. There's Neil Adams on his Batman Odyssey, and now he's working with Mark Waid on Antithesis, Fantastic Four. Mike Mignola on Hellboy, and maybe Bendis with David Walker and Naomi. These might be consistent, but it's amazing. You look at what happened with Wonder Woman with they advertised Marika Tamaki with Mikhail Zhenin on Wonder Woman. He lasted 2 issues, and that was it. And he's off the title. 2 issues. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but it's clear that I don't know what the issue is, but I think it's I want artists to make money, and God bless them if they're making more money doing cover art. But at the same time, they make a career if they put the time in to one project and stay loyal and dedicated to it. Just like Jason Fabik said, is anybody gonna remember that it's 4 years for 3 Jokers to come out? It's his magnum opus. He can die tomorrow and he'll have his magnum opus because he had the time. They gave him the time to nurture and to do it right. And there's so much impatience right now by the big 2 that they just, and it seems like artists are so easily replaceable that we're not really getting time to really nurture these talents.
I don't even think they consider the artist. Holy okay, I was like, for a second, I thought I just saw like a bunch of comments come through at once, but I was just being a moron. I think the big problem is that the publishing schedule has just become so unrealistic because I think the bar of quality that fans expect has gotten so much higher, and the publishing schedules remain the same, if not at times become more rigorous, especially with Jesus, like the DC Rebirth bi-monthly or bi-weekly thing. It's not It's not really a plan for longevity for any particular artist. And, you know, I was actually just listening to something where Scott Snyder was talking about how much of a shame it is that it looks like long runs really won't be a thing, will be a thing of the past. And that's kind of hit or miss, right? Like we've definitely seen over the last couple of years, DC in particular having some long runs that were, I mean, not even to dress up the points, like were absolute fucking stinkers. So, you know, whether or not the loss of long creator teams on one run of one book being whether that's like going to become a fossil, and whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, who knows? I feel like it's a mixed bag, but I think it's definitely frustrating, especially when you're getting into more modern comics where the same artist doesn't even continue on the same story arc. I mean, you brought it up just now with the new Wonder Woman arc with Mariko Tamaki and Mikkel Yanin. DC especially, I feel like has been, and it might just be because I've generally bought more DC than Marvel, but DC has particularly had a problem with this, where they start an arc with an artist and it's not consistent. I mean, they solicited Tony Daniel for Batman. He drew one issue. Like, what? That's a problem. And I don't know if that is, you know, like inclement on the status of the artist, or the fact that I don't think these big two publishers really understand that the model of the schedule and distribution doesn't work. And it's forcing artists to not be able to meet deadlines. And therefore they have to get shittier artists who can do it in a lesser amount of time. Like Kyle Mostert. I'll start naming names from DC's Unkillables. Some of the worst art I've seen in my entire life reading comic books. Riley Rossmo, somebody who I'm not particularly fond of. I think he has a niche where he might be able to fit. Superhero comics are not it. So you're seeing a lot of these high profile books not being able to maintain the level of artistic quality that you would want or expect from them. And that's an issue. It's a big issue. I think the lack of artistry in big two comics is becoming, you know, it is continuing to decrease because because of the publishing schedule. Quite frankly, I mean, my favorite books artistically are the stuff coming out of indie comics where where these artists either have the time they need to maybe preload stuff in advance, or maybe they just release issues quarterly, or they'll take breaks between arcs, things of that nature. You know, it speaks volumes about the quality output moving forward in my mind. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Boom, do you think it's the publishers not understanding the value of their artists, or is it sheerly, you know, my assertion that, you know, the industry is just working on a model that is not sustainable? Oh boy. Can you hear me, Boom, at all? Well, Boom, could you catch any of that? Oh. Okay, so interestingly enough, are you getting out of the studio whenever you leave? Because it still says whatever else you were on is still in the studio.
I'm sorry, what?
So you see how your other thing is still up there? Are you closing out on the other device when you leave the StreamYard studio?
I'm not. I'm already out of the other one. Now I'm trying it on my phone.
Huh. I wonder why that's a thing. Okay, well, you're coming in much clearer. Do you need me to reiterate my question?
Yeah, sure.
So what I was, first of all, let me get this thing out of there. What I was saying, or what I was asking was, do you think that the issue with the inconsistency in artists arc to arc, or even issue to issue within the same arc, is that a problem of publishers not recognizing the value of their artist? Or is that a problem with the industry working on a model that is no longer sustainable?
Well, I think it might be more the model is simply not sustainable. I mean, certainly pumping out a comic book every 2 weeks, that's you can't do that realistically. But then, you know, I think we're being too kind to the big two because the majority of them come out monthly. They still come out monthly. So what's the excuse? It still comes down to, you and I have talked about this repeatedly. I mean, it's just editorial planning. I mean, they need to get their act together. Now, you know, it's not, maybe for DC right now, they're going through, they're going through some growing pains right now, or transition pains, as AT&T figures out what it is they're going to do. And they've changed editors, and they've changed general managers to the esports guy, et cetera, et cetera. But really, they've had plenty of time during this pandemic to get caught up, for artists to have more time to get their act together. Or, I mean, it's still very disturbing to me, especially if they're going to move away from continuity. Moving away from continuity means that you don't necessarily need to change narratives abruptly because of some quick continuous change. And that should make it easier for artists to transition, or artists to take their time to get things done on time. I mean, your average comic book, from beginning to end, doesn't it take a minimum of like 6 months for the big, like, they should know at least 6 months in advance what their issue is going to be, basically 6 or 7 issues away. So that should be plenty of time. I mean, if you can't find an artist that can pump out a page a day, find another artist, because there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I find it very hard to believe that this is that difficult a concept, but I guess, I guess I don't know the business of it. Obviously, you know more about it than I am. I mean, obviously you're creating your own comic book, but it just seems to me that, maybe that's why more artists are moving toward Indiegogo. Maybe because they can take their time and not be under pressure to draw 20 pages in 30 days. Because I don't know why were artists just more talented in the past? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, what's changed? It's actually, I'm a little bit buffaloed by it. Why can't I hear you?
That was my fault. I was muted. All right. Can somebody in the live chat let me know like when I muted out? That was totally my fault. My mic was muted on that one. Oh, I'm the worst. I'm the fucking worst. I'm sorry. This is we're having such a shit show. I'm sorry, guys. Did you hear anything I said?
No, it was muted. I thought it was on my end, but
no, that was me. Okay. What I was saying was, geez, I wonder if YouTube will let me like edit this in post, like on YouTube, on there. I think I can. We'll see. The biggest thing for me is, or not even the biggest, in response to what you were saying. I don't think we've ever had more artistic talent in comics than we do right now. I think there's an overall better grasp on identity and folks in their own individualistic style. There's a lot less aping off of other artists in order to, just achieve a decent looking comic. I think the artist's overall awareness of how to be visually narrative is at a higher level than ever. I think we're now much more aware of what we can do in order to make two-dimensional images in sequence and in various orientations tell a story. So that's what really gets me, is like I can't begin to tell you how many times, like even just looking for stuff for my own project, how many talented artists I found out there that nobody talks about. And I think to a degree, a big part of it is particularly Big Two comics not having any idea what to do with their editorial staff, and that editorial staff having no idea how a comic book works. Anyways, I digress. you're seeing a lot of really great artistic talent coming out of indie comics. Whether or not you like to pursue that type of storytelling because the characters and the properties are not identifiable to you, the art in indie comics far exceeds the art in Big Two comics right now. You don't see guys like Sean Phillips working in the Big Two. Steve Epting rarely works with the Big Two right now. You got guys like Christian Ward doing beautiful books for Dark Horse. I mean, I'm sure we could name off an absolute ass ton of super talented artists that won't even work for the Big Two again because the Big Two burned the bridges. And I'm sure part of it has to do with the sort of work environment, right? It's unreasonable. It's completely unreasonable, especially when you have like turn on the heel editorial choices where these artists are either going to have to redraw a page in half a day because some fuckface has no idea what they're doing up top, or like they got to get off the book. I can only imagine. I've heard nothing but horror stories about situations like that. And, at that point, it comes down to how much of yourself you want to sort of kill for the sake of a high work ethic, and what part of you just says, fuck it, I'm just going to go off and do my own thing over here, and that way, who's editorially mandating you? Really nobody, right? I mean, when you work in indie comics, you either bring on your own editor, right? The editor can be your choice, or you'll get a staff editor at one of the indie publishers, in which case they can't edit your continuity. Like at that point, independent editors are only really in charge of distilling the writer and the artist's vision into the best product it can be, right? Yeah. Like there's no crazy crossover incentive, or there's nothing that you're required to do unless you want to, right? Like we've seen independent crossover between singular publishers' properties, but man, it's really kind of sad because you're seeing, I mean, it's also frustrating as a fan. Like, mind you, when you get something and they say this artist is going to be on this book and you get one issue out of it, or maybe 2 issues, and they totally dupe people. I think that's disgusting, by the way. Like through the process of making my own comic, I've really come to absolutely despise the ethics of these bigger companies, because given their resources, they don't need to do that. I don't know. There's numerous problems going into this, but I don't know, like, because I don't think you necessarily believed, I think you kind of brought it up as a hypothetical about there being potentially more, there would have been more talent in the industry back then, but like, where do you see this reflected in the now? Like, do you think do you really think that there might be less talent out there, or like, are they just guys that we don't get to see because publishing or the industry itself and that mechanism is totally outdated?
Well, I think this can maybe be cured by the economics of it. There's no question in my mind you should be getting paid triple what a cover artist should if you're doing the interiors. The economics has got to change because it affects the quality of the book. It just plain does. I mean, the spec market is so big now on variant covers, second printings, third printings, fourth printings. At least with the third and fourth, or second or third and fourth printings, sometimes they will print or reproduce an interior piece of comic book art. So sometimes interior artists get some cover love on second or third printings at Marvel. That's not a bad trend, but it's really bothersome to me how the economics of it, if that's the case, because the stories here, they're just not up to task. And you can draw a correlation between the most well-received stories in the last 5 years, where there's consistency between the creative teams and there aren't abrupt changes on who the artist is. I mean, I remember when Kurt Swan drew Superman, the writer would change, but the artist wouldn't. Isn't it funny that nowadays it's always it's the artist that changes, but the writer stays on for 100 issues? I'd never want a writer to stay on any title for 100 issues. Ever. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, Joshua Williamson is finally a Flash. I mean, the writing is just awful. I'm so glad he's gone. I mean, but Tom King's too much on Batman. I mean, if the artist is excellent, you can get used to an artist. And I don't know, like, I did a list here. I mean, all these great artists, I'm going to rattle them off. They haven't done a single I challenge anyone to tell me what interior art they've done recently. Carlos Delado, Robert Hack, Adam Hughes, Max Brooks, Alex Ross, Alex Garner, Lucio Perillo, Frank Chow, Peach Momoko, Jenny Frizen, Jim Lee, Brian Boland, J. Scott Campbell, Milo Manara, Todd McFarland, Tula Late, Jay Lee, Terry Dodson, Neil Adams, Bill Sekowich, Salvador LaRocca, John Cassidy, Frank Frazetta, and Francisco Francavella. Top name artists, and they haven't done an interior page in 5 years.
I can give you one though. I mean, it's not saying.
Maybe, I mean, but I'm just saying you're.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, I mean, Neil Adams did that really shitty Neil Adams written and drawn Batman Ra's al Ghul book.
Batman Odyssey. No, fair enough. I'm just saying though, it's few and far between, and it's just these are excellent artists, and I would love to see their gifts seen in the interior of comic books. But when they're on the cover artist, and especially when they're in 1 in 10 variant or a 1 in 25 variant, you know, when I buy a bunch of comics, I can't afford to spend I'm not going to spend $50 on the cover of a comic book. I mean, look, I bought this year. Today I picked it up at the comic shop. It was for cover price. Alex Ross is doing a bunch of covers for Marvel, and these are all cover price. So this is good. I mean, I don't mind this. It's rare and okay, but I mean, again, I don't even know what comic book this is. I'm not going to read it. I think it's an Empire Aftermath comic. I don't care, but it's a gimmick. It's becoming a gimmick. And they know because of the spec market. The spec market is contributing to this. It's actually harming the quality of stories. And I'm a speculator too. So I say this, and I know I'm sort of biting my nose to spite my face, but I got to admit the spec market isn't helping. People are buying shit for the covers, not for the story. So why are we doing this? Why don't we just buy prints? Why are we buying a comic book?
No, it's very true. But I think that I think you really dug into something important there. And it's that they capitalize on the spec market through variant covers. But people succumb to it. Speculators succumb to it. Like, they drive those sales. I mean, I love you and all. You drive those sales, boom. Like, and that's part of what's making it really, really easy. And it's enabling a lot of these really talented artists in many ways to just do covers. People buy them, they get paid more for them, and it takes way less time and it's way less aggravation. You know, it makes sense on their end, right? Less work, more money. Work smarter, not harder. But, you know, one of the biggest problems to me, and we've been talking about it, I think, especially over the last couple of months, and it's that monthly comics just don't work anymore. Let's be real. When it comes to both story and art, the craft suffers. And the only times when you see monthly comics work really well are with indie comics that are smart enough to take a break in between an arc and let the writer and the artist sort of recharge their batteries, catch back up on the material so that you don't have to wait, 2 months in between the penultimate and ultimate issue of an arc. Like, it's just smart. And these bigger companies are too damn stupid or just too damn money hungry to have to publish an issue every single month, even though if the quality of the book is better, people are likely going to go out and buy it in higher volumes, you know, just some simple economics. But it's a massive issue. It's a really big problem. And you're seeing, again, not just the quality of the art dip, not just the sort of familiarity of an artist and a writer being paired together. You're seeing that crumble. Just the overall craft is losing steam. And even some of those teams that you mentioned, half of them work together once every 2 years, dude. You know what I'm saying? It's like Capullo and Snyder only come together for Metal, right? Like, Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates, they haven't worked together on Venom in like an arc and a half, right? Like, they're taking a break from each other because Ryan Stegman's doing that King in Black thing. So even half of those creative teams you brought together in the last 10 years, they don't work together on a monthly basis anymore, you know? So what does that tell you? Even the sort of consistent creative teams that we know and love today that are working for Big Two aren't really that consistent.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in one respect, and that is the Big Two. I think they've given up or they've lost faith with the very artists and creative types that make them all the money. I mean, I really like, for example, I love Jimmy Palmiotti's Kickstarter campaigns too, and Amanda Connor, Paper Films. They do their own his film Paper Films company. They got a lot of great independent work, and all the Kickstarter campaigns like you said, you got really good quality art. Sean Gordon Murphy, I actually I forget the name of his. I actually ordered his Kickstarter as well, the hardcover edition of I forget what it's
Plot
called.
holes. Plot holes.
Yes, Plot Holes. I've got that coming up, and I mean, I'm looking forward to that. And I know the art's going to be fantastic. I know the story's going to be good, and I have faith it's going to be good. And like you said, it's something that would the big two take a chance on something like that? What Marvel is doing is they're really perpetuating newer titles, but they're pumping out titles focusing on just selling variant covers, just the cover art to get people to buy the comic. Unfortunately, it's the stories are not getting a lot of attention, and that's really unfortunate. I find it very funny. I only collect for Marvel right now. I collect the physical copies of Daredevil and Thor and Captain Marvel. And why? Because I actually read the story. Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil is awesome, and the art's really good, and Thor's really good. Donny Cates can tell a good story, and the art is excellent. And I just like Thompson's writing on Captain Marvel, and I could throw Venom in there too, although that's hit and miss with me. But anyways, my point being is that at least even with Venom, Ryan Stegman, consistent art with Donny Cates, they're creating a legacy here. These are the future greenback titles that people are going to be collecting for decades to come. And I'm so surprised that Marvel and DC don't realize how important it is to put those things together. I mean, at least they realized it with Snyder and Greg Capullo, because even if you don't like death metal, you have to admit that there's at least some common sense in putting those two creatives together, because they've had such success with metal, and at least there is creative consistency for long-term sales. But we don't see that on so much.
No, you make a lot of sense, and it is always dumbfounding to me how the big two in particular have been doing this longer than anybody else, and they continue more than any other organization in comics to not learn from their mistakes. You know, I mean, how long? So let's just say this. So Marvel and DC have approximately, DC in particular has been around for a little over 80 years now. Book publishers haven't made nearly the same amount of mistakes that DC has made. DC is the number 2 publisher in the entire field. Guess what? It is peanuts compared to the number 2 trade publisher, like books publisher in the entire world. You want to know why? Because they learn from their mistakes. And you want to know what happens when you make mistakes over again? You get fired. You lose your job. The industry restructures itself, or at least the publisher. Like, I'm always so dumbfounded just by how much Marvel and DC can continue to not know what the hell they're doing with their own properties half the time. And a big part of it too is like corporate IP, right? Like let's call a spade a spade. A big part of it is that they look at these characters as brands, because they are, to sell all of these other things. And comic books at this point are just a side piece to make more merchandise and to make films and things of that nature. That I think is one of the biggest problems. But I still don't get, how DC and Marvel have so much under their belts, and yet they continue to undervalue the creators. And I think you see this time and time again. Every time you have problems with that, something happens. The big two take a hit. Independent comic books get better. That's literally what made Image. That's literally how Image happened. It doesn't make any sense to me how they don't learn from those mistakes. And you're already starting to see it. Scott Snyder, literally DC's biggest writer right now, has just gone off and made his own independent imprint. And from what I've heard, he has 6 or 7 books in development through them. How much longer is he going to be at DC, right? Like, and to be quite frank, for all the criticisms that I've had about him, his new book looks really good. His new book looks really, really good. And you know who contributed to that on Kickstarter? I did. Who's been really on his ass about how bad his writing has been over the last couple of years? I have. You know what one of the big problems might be? DC Comics. So what does that tell you? And I know this, we're trying to keep this conversation is mostly sort of themed on the artist, but it's not a mutually exclusive thing. The problems that artists are having are generally the same as writers. And just kind of going back to what you were saying about how in the old days it was more often than not the writer that would leave the book before the artist would. That was, I think, in part trying to keep a level of consistency from creative team to creative team or story to story. I don't necessarily care if a writer were to be on a book longer than or an artist were to be on a book longer than a writer or what have you. I actually quite like how when the writer changes, the artist would change. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you're going to get an entirely different energy from an entirely different story. And I'm quite fond of that idea. But the big problem is when you have, again, an all-star artist who solicited for a book that's only there for maybe an issue or two. That's a problem. And a part of that, a big contributor to that, is the amount of time it takes. You know what I'm saying? Like to create a piece of comic book art and to go through all the steps, right? Because with a writer, you write your script, you maybe bring it to an editor for a pass. With an artist, like you got to do your layouts. That goes to an editor. That comes back. You detail it. That goes back to the editor. They approve it or they don't. Then if they approve it, goes to an inker. Inker inks it, goes back to the editor if they're doing the job right. Like I just considering the absolute calamity that has been DC Comics, I assume that they're not even going through all of the proper steps. But even then, if they approve the inks, it goes to colors. What happens then? Colors have to get approved by the editor again. Then it goes to letters. It's a long and arduous process, and it's unreasonable to do that with, you know, every single month for this for a book. Like it's, yeah, you gotta figure out a way to make the time that you're spending sort of on the backstage and making a comic book have a higher output. And if that means maybe taking longer breaks, if that means releasing it in bigger chunks and taking more time in between, just so that there's a consistency of flow, right? Because if if you have that same artistic process in the back, right? Layouts, editor, pencil finishes, editor, so on and so forth, but you're doing more pages at a time and you just take less time in between, that's less back and forth, right? Because when you're bringing it to an editor, you're now bringing them 30 pages, 40 pages instead of 24 pages at a time. You're getting bigger units. You're probably going to get a more consistent product. I don't know. I'm just a college kid. And my day job is being a waiter. Okay. If I can tell you this, I think there's a problem. And I'm sure there are probably some intricacies that I'm not aware of, but it's kind of ridiculous to me that the solutions, or at least the treatment, right? A treatment to one of the many problems we're having in the comic book industry, if it's something that I can see, I think that's a massive problem. I don't know, man. What do you think? Oh, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem. I'm so it's just frustrating, you know, because I want to give some examples here of some of my favorite writings. When I think of my favorite stories, there is a theme of consistency of a writer and artist. Again, I've already mentioned Kurt Swan's Superman, Howard Chaykin's American Flag, George Perez's Teen Titans and Wonder Woman run, Edward Rizzo on 100 Bullets, Michael Van Oming, The Powers with Bendis, Brian Hitch's Ultimate Avengers Volumes 1 and 2, Frank Miller's Daredevil in Sin City, Frank Cho's Liberty Meadows, Tim Sale with Hulk Gray, Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue, Walt Simonson's Thor, Jim Starlin's Dreadstar, Dan Parent on Archie, Mike Allred on X-Force, David Finch's Batman, John Romita on Spider-Man. These are classic. Every single one of these has the one thing in common: artistic integrity, artistic consistency. It's always there. You know, we can learn from our history. You know, they say that sometimes if you're not careful, history, you know, if you're not mindful of history, history might repeat itself. Well, sometimes you want to repeat history. Sometimes you can learn from it. We know what works, and it's consistency of our, you know, consistent creative teams. And in my view, I think that we should maybe, you know, maybe move towards some consistent long-term artistry. to me, it makes more sense to change up the writers and maintain a visual consistency as opposed to changing the artists and leave one writer on there, because leaving one writer on there gets stale very quick. But a good artist that you can associate with the character, look at Invincible. You know, Robert Kirkman's Invincible with the artist Ryan Otley. I mean, I can't even think of the character of Invincible looking anything other than how Ryan Otley draws Invincible. I just can't do it, because when I think of that character, I think of Ryan Otley's artistic vision, artistic renderings, and it's so huge. And this is something that, you know, with all the focus on cover art, we're focusing. It's so frustrating because everyone's focusing on what the forest looks like, and, you know, let's make the forest look nice. But, you know, the individual trees are suffering. You know, the interior, no one's caring about the stories, and it's just really, really depressing. You know, and that's why I'm wearing. You know, I want to show off my DC fandom shirt. Nicola Scott's gorgeous cover. Now, I know I just thought she's another person I'd like to see more interior art from as opposed to cover art. But there's got to be more economic incentive there. And you're right. I mean, first of all, you put yourself down. I mean, you know a lot about comics, and that's you're passionate about it. And in in whatever it was for you, 4 or 5 years, through your passion, you were able to figure all this stuff out. You sure as hell don't have to be an old timer like me to know that something is not right.
So I appreciate that. I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback though, right? Because you had mentioned how you're okay, and it might just be a personal choice. You mentioned how you're more okay with leaving an artist on a book rather than a writer because it gives a more of a consistency. To be honest though, like if the writer's changing, I don't want it to have the same artist, right? Because then I feel like more often than not, it's going to kind of play trickery on me. Like if the writing duties on a character, let's talk specifically big two are changing hands, then I would rather associate an artist with a writer, right? I think that the problem for me is that I'd like an artist to obviously be able to, for the most part, stay on arc to arc. If you need to take a break issue, you know, or a little arc in between, sure, that's cool. I think there just needs to be some element of consistency in the aesthetic, right? Because it's not like a movie or a television episode is going to change cinematographer, right? Every single installment, right? The artist, I think, needs to be a consistent part of at least a story at bare minimum. And frankly, like I understand, like it just generally takes a lot more time, a lot more energy, a lot more money to get art out of a well-known and talented artist. I get it. I get having to switch artists. But for me, I think, and this is where, again, I think I disagree with you. I would much rather have consistency on an arc-to-arc basis. And I would much rather be able to associate an artist and a writing team that work well together so that, you know, you can, first of all, for the sake of collected editions, it makes a lot more sense, right? Trades and stuff like that. But just for the sake of looking back at something, I mean, my favorite runs in comics, for the most part, I can go, okay, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Batman, Ed Brubaker, Steve Epting, Captain America, you know, Frank Miller, Daredevil, Bendis and Malieve, Daredevil, Walter Simonson, Thor, Jason Aaron and Assad Ribbick's Thor, or Jason Aaron and Russell Dodderman's Thor. Like, and even within, like I said, for example, I used Jason Aaron, his time with Dodderman, his time with Assad Ribbick, same run, but at least there was an artistic consistency for each of the arcs, right? It's not like we had, you know, Assad Ribbick and Russell Dodderman on the same arc interswitching, which is what DC's doing half the time right now. Like, don't get me wrong, like with James Tynion's Batman run, I like Gilliam March, I love Jorge Jimenez, and I really liked the artist that they introduced. I'm really mad at myself because I actually sang his praises on the last video that I did reviewing Tynion's Batman. I like all three of those artists. Do I want to rotate them every other issue? No. Like, Give them the time to do an arc. At least do an arc. At least that way, if you're going to have the same writer and do another arc, I'll have like a visual shift in the same way that we're doing a shift in the narrative or in the plotting. I don't know. I feel like there at least needs to be some sort of consistency when you're pairing writer and artist, and whether it's for an entire run or at least a story arc at a time, it needs to be there. And that's a problem. And I do very much think it's coming down to us learning the hard way that the system for comic books of publishing, the scheduling, it's obsolete. It doesn't work. And it shows in the sales as well. You look at, I mean, people bring up the manga thing. To be fair, manga art is far less intricate. Manga art in terms of the composition, the layout, and the actual detailing, far less intricate than American comics. Like I'm not saying we need to go complete manga method, but you get one digestible story, right? Even if you go more towards the European model of comics, right? Even you might wait longer, but you're getting a full story at a time. And I think it works really well that way because you have more to remember. Even if I have to wait 3 months in between installments, okay, I'm getting 3, 4 issues, 5 issues worth per installment. I'm fine with that because not only do I feel the vision is probably going to be more consistent, right? Because they're less succumbing to the stressors of crazy deadlines, but I am assuming that there's the lack of sort of segmenting the work for the writer and the artist is going to put them in more of a creative flow. Right? Less interrupted. When you take a stream and you put a dam in front of it, and then you casually start to pull pieces out and little bits of that stream are coming back, it's not going to immediately return back to full flow, full health. And I feel the same way creatively when it comes to these teams. So I think the next question to ask, because I think this is maybe what we were teasing at with the thumbnail and with the title. Do you actually think that artists, or do you not think that artists are still pushing the needle, or moving the needle, for Axel Alonso's term? Do they have that same kind of clout? And if they don't, why do you think that's the case? Or do you just think it is 100% the publishing model? Are they just a casualty of the obsolete system?
I think it's clear that artists can still move the needle. They're just moving the needle as cover artists at the present time. And that's just, that's the reality. Clearly on the Indiegogo and Kickstarter aspect, they're moving the needle because they have the time to nurture and do great work. I think of Dwayne Warren Johnson on Wonder Woman Dead Earth. It comes out every 2 months. The publishing schedule allows the artist to shine in Black Label. And it's depressing that DC is, I believe they might be getting rid of Black Label, or the rumor has it they might be getting rid of it. It's unfortunate. I mean, this is a label that allows, that gives time to the artists to utilize and work their magic. And it all comes down to all of that planning. And, you know, to me, there's just no excuse for it. And I just get so frustrated. I think artists can move the needle, but really right now, I mean, you know, they should be moving. I want to see some great interior art more and more and more. And, you know, in fairness, the top selling titles, some of it's really good. Like we got Venom and Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman on Venom. And I can't remember the artist on Thor. And then Daredevil, like some of it's really good. And
the Thor artist is Nick Klein.
Yeah, Nick Klein. Yeah, he's really good. And you know, there are some decent, pretty good interior artists out there, but you know, again, I guess it's just a little bit worrisome to me when we need to show the interior art a little bit more love, because at the end of the day, you know, nobody's going to give a rat's ass about a cover. I mean, these covers that, you know, people always brag about how much their comic book is worth, and they say it's worth $25. It's a 1 in 25 variant. You paid $25 off the stand, you idiot. So, you know, 6 years from now, if it's worth $25, it didn't have any growth. You paid $25 for it. You might have always paid cover price. That's nothing. I mean, you know, value now is being ascribed to a dollar sign. It's not being ascribed to the narrative message. It's not, you know, who talks theme, who talks structure. When we review a comic book, you know, good Lord. I mean, it's really depressing stuff when I think about it. And I just want, I want more focus on the interiors. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but you know, that's just the way it is.
I don't think you're wrong at all in any of your complaints. Frankly, it is frustrating, and it's frustrating even, you know, speaking as somebody who's looking to break into the industry, and I'm making my own book, and you know, I think to myself, you know, clearly I'm not doing it with the same speed that they are, but I also have an absolute minute fraction of the resources that they have. And that's kind of insane to me, you know, and I look at myself and what I'm able to do, and the creative team that I've surrounded myself with. I mean, for fuck's sake, man, let me just throw something out. My artist, Marcelo Salavza, and my colorist, Marcio Ferrer, are doing a phenomenal job. And these guys, you know, if I had the money, I'd be glad to pay them more than what I'm paying them. Not saying what I'm paying them is cheap, because it's just generally making comics are expensive. But if I'm able to put this together, going to school, no resources, no publishing, no facility, no system, no nothing, can't print in bulk, right? So I'm paying way more per issue. If I'm able to put this little shindig together and make a quality product, why can the two largest, oldest publishers in this industry not generate a good product? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I've said this countless times on streams as of late. The more I get into comics, the less of a fuck I give about Marvel and DC. The more I move to indie comics. I literally just told my retailer, drop all of my X-Men books. I'm going to replace them all with indie titles. And that's it. Got Department of Truth coming out. Got Al Ewing's new Boom book. Got Tom Taylor's new Boom book. Got Scott Snyder's and Tony Daniels' Noctera. You know, all this great stuff. I'm probably going to be meandering on into more Dark Horse books, because the greatest comic book editor of all time has a line of books over there that nobody talks about, but are out there winning fucking Eisner Awards. So why would I waste my time and my money for the sake of familiarity of these characters, which I love, which I like? Let's not make that an understatement. I love and adore these characters, these icons owned by DC and Marvel, their mythology, what they stand for. I talked countless times about how I would literally give my left testicle to try my hand at writing these characters. But goddamn, do I begin to not care about reading these characters when the stories, both visually and in terms of the literature of it, the writing, are garbage. These are supposed to be the big boys, right? The pros. Like, you got the fucking New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox of comics, and they're not hitting lobs. They're like, you're throwing them lobs at the plate and they're not hitting them. That's a problem. What does that say? When Joe, Bob, and Larry over here can go have the intuition to find an artist that works well for them, maybe take a little bit more time, but generate an infinitely better product, an infinitely better story, something that's going to read better over time. Because let's be real, nobody is buying comics because it's a cheap form of entertainment. It's not serviceable in the market of ideas. When Netflix is $12 and you have literally, God, I don't know the numbers. You got to have like a couple 100,000 hours worth of content on there, and you're paying $12 a month. You know what $12 a month gets me in comic books? Maybe 45 minutes. Maybe me, because I'm fucking pretentious and like to look at every little thing, maybe an hour. What is that telling you? There's a problem. And I love comics. I clearly love comics. And I talk constantly about how comics can do things that no other medium can. And the people have been doing it for the longest, that have the highest platform by which to tell these stories, are doing them the most poorly. That's a problem. It's a real big problem. So, to long-windedly answer the question that we've asked, the one that is right down yonder, do artists still move the needle? Yes. A big part of it are A, because they have their followings, B, because variant covers drive speculation. Yes. artists still very much move the needle. They probably move the needle more than anybody else, honestly. I think variant covers move prices more than most anything. Obviously, you know, you have things like it's hard to say Three Jokers because it also has brilliant art, but you get what I'm saying. Do I think that artists are losing headway? Yeah, because I think the industry, especially like I said, the big two publishers are just feeding into a mechanism that's totally non-sustainable. It doesn't make any sense. And again, maybe it's just because I'm getting older. Maybe I'm just at the ripe old age of 23. Maybe I'm just getting real jaded with the world. But goddamn, I am more and more okay with just not reading a Batman book for a couple of years, or at the very worst, going back and reading Batman stories I love instead of what's coming out now. And it's not me specifically knocking Tynan, but it's very indicative of the quality of the work that's coming out. And you make a very good point when it came to the Marvel books. I'm picking up more Marvel than you are, but to be quite frank, the only two books I care about are Daredevil and Thor. Like, they're the only ones I care to read. They're the only ones I think about when they come out. They're the only ones I feel guilty about when I'm inevitably not able to read them on time, because that's just what I do. So, you know, and when it comes to DC, I don't know how long it's been. For almost the entire 2 years that I have known you, we've talked about how disappointed we are with DC Comics. That's and again, we've gone off topic, right? But I think largely the reason why we're seeing the artists becoming less and less prominent, being less and less frequent on interior pages of comics, are entirely indicative of the big problems in comics. That's just me. I'll close out my side of the rant and let you talk. Sorry, I got heated about it.
No, I mean, go ahead and preach it. I will say that one thing that I'm reminded of, I think of Tom King's Batman run, and how many times did I say that the only thing that saved Tom King's Batman run, ultimately, the redeeming qualities that it had. He had phenomenal artists on his run. He had some really stinker individual issues, but the ones that were really good also happen to have really great artists on it. Batman Annual #2 is one of my favorite individual one-shot Batman issues of all time. And I think it was Lee Weeks did most of the art on that. And, McCall and Lee Weeks, I mean, some of those issues of Batman were just beautifully rendered. Even the Batman Catwoman non-wedding was beautifully artistically rendered. That was I even bought the hardcover of that, because sometimes art still sells a comic book at the end of the day. And I still look back, I love Darwin Cook. I've got all the DC. I remember during the New 52, I think it was, I got all the Darwin Cook covers, and honestly, look, who doesn't love an Alex Ross cover? I mean, to get all the classic, Alex Ross is doing all the classic covers, the classic incarnations of the Marvel characters on individual titles. This is beautiful stuff. These are talented. These are the geniuses. These are our modern day geniuses, our living legends that are among us today, gifting us with their creative talent. God bless them. And I want to see more of it. And if I have to see it on a cover, so be it. At the same time though, we got to remember that this is just the outside, and not to get all self-help on you, but the inside counts too. I know I look like a jerk, but I'm really a nice guy when you get to know me. And same thing with a comic book. The comic book, some of the worst comic books have the best looking covers on them, and that's really sad, because a lot of really badly written comic books have great covers. Lucio Perillo is doing the cover work for Action Comics, and the interior and the interior has Romita Jr., for God's sakes. This is, it's, talk about false advertising. Can you imagine the disappointment of a kid? You pick up a Lucy Perillo cover and you flip the pages. Oh my God. And then you get Romita Jr.'s art, who, sometimes I don't know, it's like, I think I made the joke on Twitter that, when somebody told Romita Jr. that his art couldn't get any worse, and he says, "Hold my beer," and then he grabs his crayons and he proves me wrong.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, you know, anyways, I guess I think maybe we've talked about the subject to death as it is, but it's worth talking about. At the end of the day here, my final opinion is I love the artists. I want to see more of their talents within the comic book, not just on the cover.
I agree. It's a big issue too, because comics are somehow still able to sell by using this sort of peacock mentality, right? As long as the outside feathers look great, people buy them. And it's true. Like one of the big aspects of the cover is to sell the book. It's more of a promotional item than it is like a piece of artistic vision most of the time. Well, it has to fulfill both roles, but I think for the most part, you're trying to attract people. And that's a huge problem with me. I mean, you bring up the Ramita thing. I think it's Action Comics is also getting a beautiful Gary Frank cover. A beautiful Gary Frank cover. Guess who's on the inside though? Everybody's favorite Ramita, or the younger Ramita. That's a problem. And that's a problem I've consistently had with comics since I've gotten into them is when the interior artist is not the same as the A cover. Like that's particularly an issue. But if they're not at least at the same caliber, that's a problem. And DC and Marvel a little bit less so. I think Marvel's generally does a little bit better of a job making sure that the A cover is done by the internal artist. But it's a massive issue, and you know, if it honestly takes these incredible artists just going out and doing indie projects, so be it. So be it. You know, as much as I don't want to see more of a decrease in quality in DC and Marvel, if they don't learn from their mistakes, which clearly they're not right now, they're not learning. They're not realizing that a lot of these great artists are going to no-name publishers and doing books because they're given the artistic and creative freedom that they need. They're given the time that they need. You know, like, I'm not sponsored. Y'all need to go check out TKO Presents, because they're doing a beautiful fucking job with how they're publishing their books. You can get them, in digestible stories. You can buy them as either a trade or a 6-pack of collectible issues with a little display case. I mean, for the two that I bought Sentient and Sarah. Sentient's by Jeff Lemire and Gabriel Walta, and Sarah is Garth Ennis and Steve Epting, and they're both gorgeous books. They're both really well written. This is my favorite Garth Ennis thing I've read in a very long time. They're solid books, beautiful product, well presented, digestible. And you know what? Because I had a digestible portion of story, I'll remember it when they come out with a new volume. They've given me enough to remember this story by. And that's a problem that I've consistently had with monthly comics is I don't even remember what happened last issue, because not a lot happens in the 20 pages of a monthly comic. Especially unless it's literally the most perfectly executed comic, right? And they give you all of the things, all of the components that you need in order for it to be memorable. And even if that's the case, you don't always remember it. You're going to go back and have to reread the issue before that, or the issue before that, so that you remember the issue before that, so on and so forth. That's an issue. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, artists are still pushing the needle. But the big two publishers in particular need to start paying close attention to how much to how accessible they're making it for some of these artists to do interior art. I think you're starting to see a real decline in artists who know their worth that are willing to do the interiors. You brought it up before. And that's a problem, and I think you're going to see a lot of issues with big two comics moving forward, because as I'd admit, I'm a lot more cynical and I'm a lot more critical than most people are. And I'm going to look at camera angles and lighting and shadowing and character acting and stuff that the general comic book reader will not. But you know what? Even the average Joe are starting to look at these books and go, you know, that art from blankety blank isn't the same as Dexter Soy, who's been doing this book for whatever. That John Romita Jr. art doesn't look like Ivan Rice and Superman, you know, you know, and it's going to go down the line. People are realizing it. And at what point do they stop buying those books because they're so dissatisfied in it? Those fans are going to get older. Those fans are going to get crankier. I'm the ripe old age of 23. I'm already there. So, you know, hopefully things change. If not, I very much see a future where a grand majority of the books that I'm buying are not Marvel and DC, and they're no-name properties that most people aren't going to be able to talk about. And it's just going to be me in my little corner of my room reading comic books and maybe talking about them with 5 people on the internet. But you know what? It's going to be more worth my time, more worth my money, more worth my energy. And I'm perfectly okay with doing that. You know, and the big problem for me is, when it comes to the authority that these creators carry, they give them authority in all of the wrong senses. You let Bendis, who's not selling your book, who's not getting any decent critical reception, stay on your both of them, not even just one, both of them for years. But you don't give somebody like, I don't know, Lee Bermejo a little bit of time to draw a book. You know, you don't let Jeff Johns and Gary Frank come out with Doomsday Clock before you start playing with, editorial and making it a situation where they're going to have to go back and redraw and rescript things. That's a problem. You know, I believe in giving these. I fancy myself an amateur creator. You got to give these people enough creative freedom to generate the best product possible. But you also have to know when to stop. Everything is in moderation. And that's one big problem, is that I think a lot of these superstars actually probably carry more weight than they ever had before. They're technically moving the needle more than ever. But the editorial staff don't know what direction to point the needle in for them to move it. And that's the problem. Off to you.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think that ends it on a good note here. I don't really have nothing to add. I think we've we've made our points very clear, despite having a little bit of some hiccups at the beginning. And yeah, so yeah, long live the artist, and let's get John Romita Jr. off Action Comics, and let's at least accomplish that. But I won't hold my breath.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm definitely too good. I'm going to try to clip out those technical difficulties we had in the beginning. Hopefully we'll get down to the bottom of it completely and figure out what the hell is going on. But at the end of the day, I very much want to thank everybody for watching. I know we had a little bit of a smaller crowd than usual tonight, but I do want to thank everybody for being a part of it. I know we didn't take a lot of comments from the live audience, but with the technical difficulties and everything, it was already kind of hard to stay on focus. I definitely found myself not able to contain my thoughts as well in between kind of dealing with all the little technical things. But I appreciate you guys for being here. I appreciate you for being a part of the conversation. Of course, the one and only Comic Boom, always an absolute pleasure to sit down and talk comics. So do you want to let the people know at home what you're up to, what they can look forward to on your channel? Link in the description below.
Sure. Well, I'm still actually working on the technical side, and I apologize to everyone. It's my fault. The technical difficulties usually lie on my end here lately, and I've been working on it, and I've just been busy at work and everything. So I apologize to you, Dark Knight, and I just want to. I don't need to promote my videos at this point. I need to get my technical stuff underway, and I just want to give a shout out to your to your project, Area 51, Project Helix. I'm still I'm still in the process of choosing my tier to support you. I absolutely am, and I encourage everybody to check out Dark Knight's Kickstarter, man, because it's something to behold. The art, the preview art looks fantastic. Everything about it looks so great, and I'm so looking forward to it. So I would I want to use my time to just promote your comic book, because like you said, especially when you talk about art, we already know that the writer's good. So, but the art, you got a really great artist too. So, and letterer too. So it's, like I say, great project. Looking forward to it.
My mic is muted. I appreciate that very much. And yeah, I'm definitely putting a lot into this book. If you guys want to check it out, link is in the description below to my comic book, my first ever comic book, Area 51, The Helix Project. Listen, if you don't buy the book when I become the next Alan Moore, you're going to regret it. I'm just saying. But aside from my pretentious comment, you can go onto any search engine and just type in The Helix Project or Helix Project Kickstarter, and it'll pop up. We are 67% of the way through funding, and it's only been a week. I would love to get to the point where we can announce some stretch goals for you guys, because all of those stretch goals result in upgrades for every single one of the backers, which is super great. Yeah, so just getting into it, here is the rough design. The art is finalized, but the rough design for the A cover for Area 51 The Helix Project #1 under my own publishing label, Pocket Watch Press. And the variant cover art will be up here very, very soon. I'm really excited to announce that and show that off. But if you want to come and take a look, we have a couple sneak peeks at interior pages, things of that nature, a little bit of a step-by-step process. I brought up earlier the process of layouts to pencils and inks to colors. This is a little bit of an idea of what that looks like, a little bit of behind the scenes. And then you'll go into another interior page and this beautifully rendered tragic shot from, I think, the emotional linchpin of the entire issue, which I am super, super proud of. But if you want to go and take a look and you don't trust me or the value of my opinions, we do have a marvelous rewards tier for you guys that I think are very much worth the amount of money I'm asking for. I've been doing my best to be conscious of the fact that I am a new creator of which you haven't read any of my work. I haven't guaranteed quality of work, so I'm trying to give you the best value I can in the product. I'm confident in the writing. I'm confident in the art, but I want to make sure that all of my readers, all my customers know that the product they're buying, the money that they are contributing to this campaign is going to be rewarded to them tenfold. So for as simple as $5, you get a signed physical copy of the book. Kickstarter exclusive, every single physical copy of this book will be signed, which is a beautiful thing. And I will personalize it for you if you so request. I'm more than happy to do it. For as little as $4, you get a digital copy of the book. Every tier, $7 and up, along with all of the random physical rewards you'll receive, you'll get your digital copy before the book even goes to print, which is wild. You will be amongst the first to be able to read this book. And it is very much a big thank you to those of you that are getting on the train of my comic book writing career from the first stop. Those of you that believe in me, that back me, that support me, I want to give you all the thanks in the world I possibly can. And that is one way in which I want to show that. And if you want to get into the real cool nitty gritty, if you're a retailer, we do have a retailer package as well. And then going up as far as receiving a producer credit on my comic book, which is super cool. Along with that, you'll get a number of other things like a private 30-minute behind-the-scene producer Skype call, various exclusive shirts, merchandise, clothes that will only be released through the Kickstarter, copies of the script, more behind-the-scenes art, artist prints. You can get drawn in as a background character or even as far as getting drawn in as a supporting character, of which are both limited. I only have 4 slots to be drawn in as a supporting character. One of them has already been taken. I have 2 slots that have already been taken for background characters, so it has been fairly hot. And I just want to thank everybody that already has contributed, that is backed me, my vision, and I can promise you that I will not disappoint. I've said this countless times that when it comes to me making this comic book, I don't want it to be a good first issue. I don't want it to be great for a first issue. I want to make it a great fucking comic book. And that is everything that I'm looking to deliver. So please, if this remotely interests you, if you trust me and my vision as a creative, or if you feel like I maybe made good points throughout any of these discussions or review videos, please give this a look. I would absolutely love to get this project funded, get into stretch goals, and give you guys some really, really great upgrades. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. The final stretch goal, we'll have multiple incremental, but if we can double the base goal, I will release this first print, this first issue for one time only as a hardcover, which I would absolutely love to give to everybody that has backed the physical project of no extra cost to anybody. So I know that's far in the distance. That is very much looking up towards the sky, but I would love to get to that point and deliver a higher quality product to be the vessel for a story that I think is also high quality and kick-ass. So make sure you guys go give that a look. I'm really bad at actually talking about my own stuff because I have no structure for it. But with that being said, If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel down below. We are, I think, like 3 subscribers away from 500. I don't know. I've been so focused on the book and all of that stuff that this has just kind of seemed like another thing. But of course, make sure to subscribe to my wonderful collaborator here. There's a good reason why I bug him more than anybody else to sit down and talk about picture books and the funny pages. So with that out of the way, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. And this has been Dark Knight Nation and the illustrious Comic Boom signing out.